Good morning, everyone. I want to start off by telling you guys a little bit about one of my favorite performers, Billy Joel. Hopefully you recognize the name or even some of the music that was being played, but I know I inherently take a risk of bringing up a performer whose last greatest hit came out about 10 years before most of you were born. See, Billy Joel scored 33 top 40 hits over 3 decades. He was nominated for 23 Grammys, took home 6. His greatest hits compilation is one of the best-selling albums all time in the United States. But none of these accomplishments really matter that much to me or thousands of his other fans out there. It's one thing above the rest that really stands out about Billy Joel. You see, he's a Long Island boy. The root of my fandom derives from that fact. It's where I grew up. You know, it wasn't exactly, his era of music wasn't my time. It's what my parents listened to. Either at my age, when you were growing up, you were listening to rock or you were listening to rap, and he didn't really fit either of those genres. But I know a bunch of us were listening to him. I know this because once a month for the past 4 years, he's been selling out Madison Square Garden, and my social media feed is filled with videos, pictures, and posts of all of my friends from high school who were at these shows. I've lost track of the amount of Billy Joel shows I've been to, and I'll be there again on Saturday night. No matter your age, no matter your generation, Billy Joel is Long Island, and I want to tell you a little bit about growing up there. Let's discuss some important truths about Long Island before we get started. Nobody actually lives in Long Island, you live on Long Island. While Brooklyn and Queens are technically a part of New York City, they actually reside on Long Island, even though you go from Long Island into Brooklyn or Queens and then back out to Long Island, you're never actually in Long Island, you're on it. I hope you're still with me. When people ask where you're from, you actually say Long Island. You don't take the risk of telling the actual town, therefore them not recognizing you're from Long Island and not an inferior part of New York. And actually we've gone past just calling it Long Island, and we call it the island, because while there's many islands out there all across the world, none are as important as Long Island, and it should be recognized as such. Another important fact, if you ever hear anyone refer to Long Island as Strong Island, they are not actually from Long Island. You should end that conversation. One thing that I miss dearly above everything else that I can't understand why I can't find them anywhere are bagels. And I know you're probably thinking I've had them down here in the Commons or in Connecticut, but that's not an actual bagel. Long Island is where you go to get one. I still have dreams of walking into a bagel shop on Long Island on the weekend, and there's the smell of a fresh batch of bagels coming out, and I know that's going to be my meal that holds me over for the next 8 hours. I wait for the day that our STEM scholars stop pursuing trivial things like technological and engineering excellence and really take on the noble quest of recreating this Long Island masterpiece. I do have to confess, in moments of weakness, I will frequent a Bruegger's or an Einstein's Bagels. I'm not proud of it. I actually kind of look around a little bit before I go in to make sure there's not some sort of bagel police that's going to monitor my movements. They're going to call me out on it and put me away in prison. The villagers of my hometown will storm my parents' house. They'll tie them to the back of the horse. They'll send them over the Verrazano Bridge to the nightmare of being in Staten Island. Is it really worth the risk? I hope by these statements you're starting to get the sense of the mindset of Long Islander. Passionate about just about everything, inherently aggressive and oftentimes stubborn. You have no choice to grow up with thick skin. Here's a fun fact. Like Billy Joel, I shared the nickname Piano Man for a couple of years. While I've never actually played the piano, I had a baseball coach that watched me run around the bases on an extra base hit, and he commented when I get back to the dugout that I ran so slow that it was like I actually had a piano strapped to my back. This is Long Island. Whatever the reason it was, we relate to Billy Joel songs. Whether it's the lyrics in My Life, you can speak your mind, but not on my time. Or why do I go to extremes? If I stand or if I fall, it's all or nothing at all. Or even in You May Be Right. You told me not to drive, but I made it home alive. And I guess that only proves that I'm insane. He illustrates the giant chip on the shoulder of Long Islanders. You see, there are different levels of New Yorkers. Real New Yorkers live in Manhattan, and if you have any question about that, ask somebody who lives in Manhattan, they'll tell you that's the truth. But the people in the Bronx, in Brooklyn, in Queens, they are true New Yorkers, and they feel that way and carry a chip on their shoulder that are not recognized as such. And when those populations started moving out to Long Island in the masses to create the Long Island that I know, that chip grew even larger, not being as removed, not being as close to that New York mindset. Billy Joel represents that chip and a lot of flaws in our people. You know, he comically refers to his song, She's Always a Woman, as the love song he wrote for ex-wife's number one. In 2015, he was married for the 4th time. Just this past month, he became a father again at the age of 68. He's battled depression and alcoholism over the years, and let's just say he doesn't exactly have a clean driving record. But we loved him even more for his missteps. We saw our flaws in his. And that gets me to the toughest part of the talk, admitting the flaws of the people of Long Island. Let's address the elephant in the room. There's an accent, and it's not great. In true Long Island mindset, I went off to college and people would call me out in this accent. I would actually reply, I don't have an accent, everybody else does. I believed that for a couple of years. Listen, we shop at the mall, we walk our dog, we swim in the water. We talk over a cup of coffee and it's awesome. I remember the distinct moment where my opinion of that accent turned. I worked in college admissions for a number of years, and I naturally wanted to grab Long Island as my travel territory. A high school senior came up to my table and was filling out an inquiry card, and I'll never forget this moment. I was trying to put myself in a teenage girl mode. She looked up to me and said, "Where it says extracurricular activities, what do you mean, like softball?" I like to think I hid the horror on my face, but I'm not so confident that I did. You know, the funny thing about the Long Island accent is that while it's not so easy on the ears, you'll never meet a group of people who can enunciate the names of towns named after Native American communities. Wantagh, Hauppauge, Ronkonkoma, Massapequa. It's truly a thing of beauty. Now, I want to let you know that accent never fully goes away. I hide it on most days and people comment that you don't sound like a Long Islander. But it definitely pops up, whether I'm home, whether I'm even on the phone with my father, especially when I'm angry. You see, I'm a diehard New York Mets fan. It's my passion. And if you know anything about the New York Mets, most of those games don't end well. But unlike Bruce Banner, I don't turn into a green monster. It's just a Long Island mindset that comes back out. It's hidden deep within your soul and can pop out at a moment's notice. And I bet you'd be surprised of how many faculty that accent lies deep within. Now, while I can hide the accent, there's one thing that I haven't been able to shake as a Long Islander. I still drive like a Long Islander. That could be a pretty scary place to drive, and you really need to put yourself into that mindset in order to survive it. So here's the best way I can describe it. You get in your car, you buckle your seatbelt, you turn the car on, shift it into drive. And at that moment, everybody else on the road becomes your mortal enemy. We abide by the George Carlin playbook. Anyone driving slower than us is an idiot. Anybody driving faster is a maniac. And it's not so much just the aggressive mindset. You have to have the play-by-play commentary of everything that's going out there, even if you're in the car by yourself. My dad was the best at this. My favorite scenario would be in the car, stopped at a red light, and there'd be a car right in front of us. And that light turns green, and that car doesn't move. Now, instead of providing a gentle reminder by tapping on the horn and saying it's time to go, we'd rather stew in our car, get angry, and yell out something like, "Any color you like, pal." Cracks me up every time. I've been thinking a lot about Long Island lately. I truly loved growing up there, and I always describe it with fondness as I talk about it. Even though I'm not really there that much anymore. I've actually just passed the point in my life where I've lived in Connecticut longer than I've lived on Long Island. I love living up here, but I miss that identity. I miss the blind loyalty from the people in your neighborhood. I still get excited when I bump into people who are from the island. There's very much an attitude of, we're the best, why would we go anywhere else? One of the best decisions I made when I left college was taking a job in college admissions. There was a lot of travel as a part of that. And while there were some amazing trips to California and Puerto Rico for recruiting, I spent a lot of time in Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, Kentucky, and Missouri. Not exactly the glamorous lifestyle I envisioned for myself. But I needed it for a number of reasons. First, we're not so great with geography on Long Island. I mean, New England is basically Boston and its surrounding parts. Once you get west of New York City, there's this toxic dump that people call New Jersey. And basically anything between that and California we lump into as the Midwest. I mean, where are my New York students? Where are my Westchester County kids in the audience? Yeah, I need to break it to you. You actually live upstate, and that's not really New York. Hashtag sorry, not sorry. See, I loved Mr. Foley's message last week about doing a cross-country trip while you're young. During that travel I did for work, I made some awesome friends from all over the country. I remember the first time I was called a Yankee by my friend from Thibodaux, Louisiana. I've listened to stories about people growing up in Winona, Minnesota, and I kept a straight face when a friend's wife told me about how to avoid bear attacks when you're hiking in rural Alaska. But I've also watched their bizarre reactions as I've shared stories from where I grew up. So even though I've been living in Connecticut for some time there, they still looked at me like I was a loudmouth from Long Island. And it was really when I started to figure out how I was being perceived by others. One of the areas I've noticed that most recently, and a big part of my upbringing, is that I'm the son of a New York City police officer. And I grew up in a town where my friends' dads were all cops and firefighters. And I've definitely noticed, especially over the past few years, the difference in reactions I get when I used to tell that story compared to how it is now. You know, I joke a lot about the habits of Long Islanders, and it's because it's funny. But we all have our biases from where we grow up. While I don't get a visceral reaction from folks when I tell them I'm from Connecticut, there are definitely habits that we develop here that lead into that bias. No matter where you grow up, your biggest flaw can be surrounding yourselves by like-minded people who see things exactly the way you do. In some ways, my Long Island pride is no different than Boomer Sooner, or Texas Forever, or Roll Tide. My absolute favorite Billy Joel song is Everybody Loves You Now. It's written about a woman who becomes famous and is too good to come back to her hometown in Cold Spring Harbor. And it's just the most Long Island thing in the world. I swear I could cure cancer, make millions, and be on the cover of Time magazine, and I still come home to my friends and be like, hey, Rupp, you remember when that coach called you piano man in baseball? The verse I really love is this. Close your eyes when you don't want to see, and stay at home when you don't want to go. Only speak to those who will agree, and close your mind when you don't want to know. You have lost your innocence somehow, but everybody loves you now. It took me a long time to have real conversations with people who I don't agree with. More and more now what I find is a lot of those people are the people I grew up around. Understand how your home, your town, and your school can lead into these biases and how they shape you. And really seek out the opinions of those who don't relate. Do it here, do it often, do it when you travel. Not to be a Nike shill, but just do it. But before you do that, first, could somebody please get to the design lab and figure out the mystery of the Long Island bagel? Thank you.